So for us, it's always about building trust at scale. So our mission is how do we build trust at scale so we can grow our audience, create qualified pipeline, and dominate our category.
What are some ways that you take followers and subscribers and impressions and turn them into customers?
The way that we split kind of our content in general is
Hey, Nehal, welcome to the show.
hi, I'm so excited to be here and talk about all things content.
Yes, and you're a perfect person to do that with. I'm really excited for this one. So for a little bit of context for everybody, you're the content marketing lead at Clari. And Clari is a revenue management platform. I know you all do a lot. The scope of what you do has expanded, over the years, but very well-known brand in the B2B space. I really think for this episode and our convo, we can just dive into not only what's working for you all right now, like content wise and what you're seeing, but also like your opinion about the content marketing manager or content marketing lead role and the evolution of that role, like what we're going to see with that as time goes on. I think that'll be really interesting. But maybe to start out, like just like a quick high level, what is the breakdown or prioritization of content versus other, marketing and sales led activities at Clari? Like, what's sort of the philosophy around content within the overall philosophy around marketing and sales at Clari?
Yeah. So for us, it's always, we talk about this a lot at Clari and on podcasts I've been on. It's always about building trust at scale. So our mission is how do we build trust at scale so we can grow our audience, create qualified pipeline, and dominate our category. And so that's kind of like the philosophy that we live by. And then when it comes to content, we're kind of laser focused on three different areas. We want audience growth. We want to build a dedicated audience that really makes and influences purchasing decisions. We want to create demand, so get people excited about Clari, the revenue platform. And then we want to capture the demand. So how does that convert eventually? So that's kind of how content has always been split up here, but it's how we kind of align our goals to the rest of the marketing org.
And for your focus, I'm sure your work probably touches on all three of those, but like, what is the focus of your day-to-day work within those three buckets? Audience growth, create demand, capture demand. Yeah, what are you kind of working on within any or all of those?
So I'm kind of doing all of it. So when it comes to audience growth, it's all of our distribution channels and stuff. So making sure that, our social channels are growing, or are we doing a newsletter, or how many subscribers are on that newsletter? So making sure we're creating that like raving fan experience to let people know like, hey, we're producing content that is educational, actionable, and insightful for people to just like resonate with it without any kind of soft buy or soft download or anything. So that's kind of the creating demand portion of things. Then the capturing demand is, okay, now that we have created these followers or got people to get on our pages and everything, how do we get them to download something? So that can look like anything from an ebook, a white paper. We have cheat sheets that we do. So I work on helping produce that actual content. And then also content owns all of the content with webinars and events and thought leadership. So we kind of have a big scope because at the end of the day, we're the ones guiding our POV and our messaging. And so making sure that we are aligned in creating these themes month by month that all of the content efforts kind of wrap around behind.
That's cool. I love that approach. So yeah, could you break down like what are those pillar distribution, distribution channels?
Yeah.
So you mentioned newsletter, webinar, of course, social. Could you just go through like what those are? And maybe we could just start diving into, how you think about some of the strategies with it all.
Yeah. So the way that I like to think about our content is it's a three-pronged approach. Okay. So we have our executives, we have Clari corporate, and then we have the employees. And so one of the things that I learned here is like the executives at the end of the day, our personas that we sell to and we want to buy from us are people who are VPs, CROs, CEOs. They're very much above the line. In order to get them to buy from us, we realize like executives really have to have a strong presence because they're the ones building trust at scale. So it starts top down. When I started doing that, I started interviewing our executives and asking them, hey, like what are some buckets that you're passionate about and what do you like to talk about? CEO is different than a CRO who's different than a CFO. And so once I started figuring out how much are they willing to contribute and how willing are they to be on social or in content, I was able to kind of create different content buckets for each of them. And so if we take your CEO, for example, Andy Byrne, amazing guy. He always was like, I want to be hands on. This is my baby. This is my company. And I really want to get involved in social. So how I work with him is I like sit down with him and we brainstorm like, hey, you're going to have a newsletter. And he's like, I want to be in charge of my newsletter. I need ideation for content ideas. I want to do it myself. And I'm like, okay, amazing. So I work with him to launch his Rise Up newsletter, which is a thought leadership bi-weekly newsletter. So we see a lot of traction coming over there. He's like, I want to be active on social. Okay, great. So we have our CEO who wants to be on social, wants a newsletter. Then we have maybe our CRO who's like, hey, I don't feel comfortable with social yet, but I'm down for webinars. I like to be on podcasts. I want to be on webinars. Amazing. You like to talk? Great. I love that. Okay. How do we position his content to be like something that he can talk about in webinars and podcasts and stuff? And then how can I repurpose that content? So executive strategy is making sure the executives get their shine and like are doing what they want to be doing on social. Then we get down to Clari Corporate. Clari Corporate is focused on the company narrative. It's focused on, just we're talking about employees, hiring, we're talking about employer branding, all of it. We're talking about demand gen, the brand, like it's basically the content that people can easily read on LinkedIn. That's like, okay, cool, I learned something from this and then walked away from it. But we don't know who our personas are for LinkedIn a lot of the times because it's kind of mixed. You get above the line, you get below the line. And so for that, the best strategy that I use for the corporate side of things is making sure that I can recycle a lot of the content that we already have. So if execs are on podcasts, how can I create it into a blog and recycle it? Or maybe our execs were doing a keynote. Can I make this a gated playbook? But the biggest thing about the middle bucket, a corporate, is how do we infuse the voice of the customer? So it's more so being like, hey, our customers are talking about us and we love our customers. We're so grateful for them. They're saying these things about us. How can we amplify their voice and amplify our partnership with them? And so that's kind of like where I focus on in the middle bucket, I would call it.
Yep.
And then the final bucket would be employees. So how do we create our employees into thought leaders to again amplify our brand? So when we have like a launch or we're like in Forbes or Forrester or something or do a big piece, it's like how do we get employees excited about it and wanting to post about it? And the thing that we do there is asking them how if they want to build their brand. People forget that building your brand is very much like social selling. And so once you can build that trust with your own followers, not only do we get the benefit as Clary of like help, like, working with our employees, but they also get personal opportunities. So there's a lot of stuff that I do in these three buckets, but that's kind of how I view my little
I
buckets.
love that. How do you manage all that? Because that's a lot. What does your team look like? Or yeah, what is your like operationalizing all of that look like?
Yeah, so we have a team of three to four. One person owns customer and the voice of the customer, which is really helpful because they manage that relationship and they let us know when like the content team can kind of work together. Then we have somebody who does like thought leadership and influencer marketing. And so they're the ones reaching out to either internal influencers, so people at the company, or external. So where can we like put ourselves in when it comes to different groups like RevOps groups that are happening or like Pavilion, 30 Minutes to President's Club. So they're managing these third-party relationships. Then we have somebody who's doing kind of the webinar and social on the corporate level. And then I lead all of thought leadership, the messaging, the themes, and then executive social.
You know, back in the day, like all the things the underneath the scope you just described would probably require, an even bigger team because it is a lot. But what have you found as like whether it's, tools or process wise that has made this whole thing efficient? Like, do you kind of have a set engine that you run this through? So it's almost SOP'd or yeah, what does that look like, on a week to week, month to month basis?
One thing I love about Clary is that we are super cross functional and we do have these like awesome offsites where we're shared about the company goals, the direction, like what our themes are. And we work together as a marketing team to come up with the themes. So once these themes are created, it's really easy for the sub functions, whether it's revenue marketing, whether it's content marketing, whether it's demand gen, or that is revenue marketing, but our events marketing, to kind of then give their plans under. And then it's like, how do we fuse everything together? And so, with that being said, we do have a lot of awesome tools. We use things like Asana to manage everything. I'm a huge fan of Sprout Social to kind of keep the lights on with social when it comes to execs and corporate and things. So, we are training everybody often. And then the one thing that I love doing for employees is like, I love holding brand building sessions every couple months to be like, hey, your digital reputation is your personal brand. And that's what gets them excited because you're not doing it for me, you're doing it for yourself.
Right. That's something that stays with them, like for I don't want to say the rest of their life, but as long as they're like on LinkedIn, on social, stuff like that.
And you'd be surprised. Like a lot of people are very scared of social and building their personal brand because they don't have the tools to do so. They're like, "Oh, if I post on social, they're going to get my credit card number or something like random." Like they think it's like not good, especially the older crowd and stuff. So it's like how do we get a buy-in from them to be like, "Look at these likes, engagement, people commenting." And with our CEO especially like the comments that he gets on his posts that he writes are so amazing. They're from CROs, CEOs, agreeing or disagreeing or asking questions. And it's really about him building up his persona as a CEO in the revenue space.
That's got to be a tough challenge to overcome. So like what advice would you have for other content marketers who are tasked with helping their SMEs or internal thought leaders or internal, employees to now be sort of like the face of the content brands or their own mini content brands
Yeah.
to help the company? What are the things you could recommend to them, whether it's like approaches they could take with them at a high level philosophically so they're less like scared and worried about it, but also like here's practically how you can do this in the mix of like the CEO, I'm sure his calendar is insane. So it's like how is he running, like practically how is he running that biweekly newsletter and the social posts and things? So there's almost like two sides of that.
Yeah. So on the first side of things is I would say identify your group of 5 to 10 internal champions. So put out a message saying, hey, we want to create these awesome thought leaders at XYZ company who would be interested in learning about how to grow their personal brand, learning how to post, learning how to create an audience, and then eventually learning how to monetize off of it because, that comes at the end of things. It's not the first thing you think about. When we did that, we found that there was like 30, 40, 50 people that are like, hey,
Wow.
we're interested. Okay, we want to do that. Okay, from that, how do you niche down? And you start hosting the sessions of like, okay, how many people showed up? Maybe 15, 20. Okay, these people are really, really interested. Also, I realize a lot of these people are people who have quotas and they think that they want to do social selling as something that could help them attain or exceed quota. Once we start talking to them and stuff, we start to say, okay, how do we fuse your personal brand with Clary's personal brand? And they're like, okay, these are the buckets that I want to talk about. I did a one-on-one with them, especially these like 5 to 6 internal champions. And we figure out what they're going to talk about. I work with them to create like videos on how they use like Clary in their day to day and what they want to share with the rest of the world. So not only are they talking about their personal brand, they're talking about Clary too, which is helping them with inbound at the end of the day. And so you'll find people to do that. And so I think the first step is creating a little quick ask of like who at the company is wanting to become a social champion.
That's really interesting that it's not necessarily like we like baked into multiple people's job, that
Yeah,
it's more like who wants to be involved with
exactly.
this. Do you think that's the right approach, or do you think some companies should like actually bake that into the roles so it doesn't necessarily feel like something to do on top of their job, or like it's maybe not even necessarily compensated like with that? Or how do you think about that?
I don't think companies should bake it into the role. I think it's definitely something that comes from within. I always tell people, like, as much as I love content and I do it in my personal life, the second it becomes like a job, it's not fun for me anymore. And so it really does have to come from within of like, hey, I'm willing to take this an extra step to become an exceptional seller or become like this social media star. Like, I hate using the word influencer. I like thought leader instead, but like the opportunities you get from being a thought leader, you get the way that you kind of highlight it is like, do you want to be on webinars and podcasts? Do you want to be the go-to expert for things? Your job opportunities will open up down the line. Like people are very much like, yes, I want to do that. And so it's trying to figure out who those people are. The other thing that I did was I created a Slack channel that's very optional, and it's just called like Clary Social. And in that Slack channel, I post like it's like an interactive group. I post tips and tricks. And this is not those internal, only 5 to 6 internal champions. It's actually like 150 Clarions who join this channel just because they want to hear tips and tricks from me on a weekly basis of like, hey guys, polls are working right now on LinkedIn. You should try it out. Or they're like using it to amplify their posts. I'm like, hey, use this channel to be like, I just posted something for the first time. Maybe you're nervous. You're like, am I going to get engagement? So it's kind of a community aspect, if you think about it, that also gets people more comfortable. So step one was like, hey, who's interested? Step two was, hey, let me create a community. And then step three is who wants these one-on-ones to take it a step further? And then I got the 7 to 8 people who were very, very interested. And those people are crushing it on social.
Super smart. And honestly, like, there's nothing more powerful than just the internal motivation. So like just helping those folks be able to, have an opening to start doing this, but like they're already internally motivated to do it rather than it's like a task that they got to check off in Asana. And so that's just going to work much better.
I was going to say my recommendation for a lot of companies, if they don't have a social or content person that's like very much knows the LinkedIn strategy and how it works and stuff, I'd recommend getting somebody to do it. Like I've also done a lot of like sessions here and there. And the amount of people that show up in these sessions who don't even know like the basics of LinkedIn is just like, wow, like how do you set up a profile? How do you optimize your profile? How do you show off your, your media and things that you've worked on? How do you write a post? Why do you post link in comments? Like these, like you have to start from like step one for a lot of these people and then go into it, which I've seen really takes away the stress of, hey, where do I start?
Totally. And we see that too a lot with like video shows and podcasts and things like that, where a lot of the mental, like the hurdle between like wanting to do it and then actually doing it a lot of times is like 80% of the stress and the thinking around it is like, what tools do I use? What equipment do I use? Like, how do I post this? How do I get it on Spotify? It's more like the operational kind of just
Yeah,
foundational level, like you just talked about. And so just getting like an easy button for those things, it's like, hey, honestly, 80% of the thought should not be around those things because like 80% should be like, how do we make content people want to consume?
exactly.
And so just you giving that, like, here's it, like, set up the profile. Here's like just the kind of checklist stuff that's like easy for people to just, all right, that takes one day. We got that knocked out. Now let's get to like the real important thing of like, we need people to read, watch, listen, consume this, and actually care about it and want to hit follow and want to listen to more we have to talk about. That's the hard part. So I think that's really smart to help people get that off the ground.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the most like underrated techniques for, building a follower growth that many people don't do is kind of when you're sending out an email campaign to your if you have a gated piece of asset and you're sending it out and stuff, or if you're doing a follow up from an event, make the PS line follow our LinkedIn. And I think people forget that, they just attended your event, but they have no idea who you are on social. They have no idea who you are as a company except that event. So it's like, make sure you cross tap channels, which is kind of what you were talking about.
Totally. And what I found is like series based, even could just be a LinkedIn series, doesn't need to be a show or even a video thing. It's just like, hey, every week we post something on LinkedIn about XYZ. Like that's it. That's a series based piece of content, which is this really strong pull for people to want to hit follow to receive the next installment of that series as well. So like, yeah, I think that's really smart. Yeah, let's get into maybe some of like the stuff you're seeing work like on
Yeah.
social, or like what are some of the wins that you've seen from the team as of late, and what's been working, the best, whether that be like LinkedIn or some of the webinar stuff, or are you all doing like podcast like shows as well?
Yeah, so we used to have a Run Revenue podcast, which took a little bit of a break, but it's coming back. So I've been in the podcasting space for a while now. But, the thing that has worked is again, I keep going back to the employee activation thing, but aside from creating internal champions, I think whenever there's like a launch day happening for like a product release, or, we were just featured in Forrester as a leader, which was awesome. How do we get our employees to rally behind it? So, one of the things that I do is create activation docs
Mm,
for these big lightning strike moments. And it's as simple as a copy paste with here's some imagery for people to amplify the news. It's not a forced thing. Obviously, you can't force anybody to post on social, but our CEO Andy, during our weekly meetings, he kind of announces it. Hey, everyone, if you have 5 seconds, take like 5 seconds to post this. Check out this activation doc, and we've seen so much value from that. I think I posted on LinkedIn that you've also mentioned is, well, our last lightning strike moment, we got like 3 million impressions because like 20% of the company posted, which is really high, because if you can even get 6 to 8%, that's like, wow.
yeah. So like, what are you putting into that copy? Because I really like, and I've been, there's some companies out here as well that do like Beehive. I don't know if you've heard of them, but like they do a really good job of like they release new features like often, and then they bake that into part of their marketing, which is just like, here's the new feature. But then there's the balance of, well, if you're just talking about the new feature, that's like super bottom of funnel. Like it may not necessarily like be something that somebody scrolling like is going to get value from, unless there's different ways that you're approaching that messaging or that copy. So like, how do you think about the balance of like, we're just strictly pushing a new feature on social, or like, is there some other content you're putting in it? So the feature is like part of the content, but it's not the main content itself. Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that we think about it is some people are technical and they love the feature and they just want to talk about the feature. So we have an option available for them. The other people, we give thought starters. So we're like, oh, this helped me save X number of hours, or this helped me do this, or first person storytelling. The other day, I noticed this. Like, I'll write like a few prompts where people can start thinking about it. I will say, like, most people go for a copy paste option because it's the easiest, but there are people who are really wanting to like take it that extra step. I also want to like touch on, AI, because I feel like AI has really changed the content game. And so one of the things that previously at companies and stuff is like everyone used to copy paste the same option, and you're kind of seeing the same thing, like it was written by the company, no big deal. But then LinkedIn also started maybe dinging some of that. They're like, maybe you can't, if everybody's posting the same thing, I don't they're like, maybe it's a bot, or maybe it's this. So it's like, now how do we enable employees to be like, hey, I wrote a version of it, but add your own tone and voice to it. And if you don't have time, use ChatGPT. So be like, hey, I am this kind of person. This is my role at Clari. This is what I'm trying to say. Can you help me write this in an eighth grade reading level? Because eighth grade is where it's at. You don't want anything more. People will not understand. And so from that, you also see a lot of different ways of people talking.
I totally agree. And also like the LinkedIn takeovers, I think are still really powerful, but I think now like they have become a little more common. So having each person have their own spin on it, I think is really important, rather than everybody posting like the exact same thing for the most part. We'll still obviously like make noise and stuff, but I think the efficacy of it might not be as high as if there's like that personalization from each one. How do you quantify success with all of this stuff? Like, what do you measure as like, okay, this is working? Because ultimately, like goal is pipeline and revenue, but there's also like leading indicators for that, for content. So like, yeah, what are you looking at for like, okay, we are succeeding, we're on the right track with all this?
I think there's a few different things. So the one aspect is like, do we have an audience growth? How is their engagement rate doing? Are people actually interacting with their content, impressions? How many people are seeing our content? Then on the flip side, it's how many downloads are we getting? How many people registered for the webinar? Are people, was the content engaging enough for people to get that first touch point in the marketing funnel? And then lastly, the main thing that if we can get is how can we convert it? And so one of the top things for us is if somebody books a demo, that's like a huge win for us. So it's like, how can we get people to get to that demo stage of wanting to learn more about Clary?
I'm assuming you're running, paid as well, and maybe outbound and some other things. So how are you all looking at, this is from the like organic content side that is created the demand and driven the inbound?
So yeah, we're huge on UTM links here. We are linking everything to organic social or newsletter or things because we need to follow that lead or that touch point. And so everything is tracked, and it's kind of crazy to see how much pipeline influenced our entire process does. So that's definitely something I'm like very top of mind in, because I think people get this wrong. Like a lot of times, like marketing is not where everything converts. It's more so to influence the buyer decision rather to make the buyer decision. But people forget that there's so much work that goes into that. And so we track everything to be like, hey, we influence this much pipeline. At the end of the day, the sales team closed it.
Are you using like any paid for the audience growth side as well? So like paid on top of organic with the goal of growing the audience as opposed to like paid, using content to drive a click and a conversion.
No, we actually don't use any of that. And honestly, at a lot of the companies that I've been at, or all of them, we've never done it for audience growth specifically. So we really double down on organic efforts for that growth. And then we go to paid for conversions, clicks, etc.
Do you have a goal with like the audience growth side? Like where are you at currently with it? Do you look at it like big picture? Okay, here's what we got on LinkedIn. Here's what we got newsletter. Here's what we're getting on our webinars and our, events and stuff like that. Like how do you look at the growth? Like what you're looking for with the growth side?
So my goal is usually 20% quarter over quarter for LinkedIn, especially. So I'm like, can I grow my audience by 20%? Can I do it by 20%? Can I do it by 20%? Okay.
Yeah.
And then for like Andy's newsletter and Andy's social, I look at, his growth and how much he's willing to put into it, how much he's willing to post. And then I determine numbers, and I increase it by like a few percentage every quarter to test myself. But we try to keep the numbers pretty like significant of like however he's doing and stuff. So that's basically how I measure everything while having actionable goals. For other things, my team and I, we have different goals for different things. So it's like how many registrants or how many MQLs can you get from a webinar? That would be my webinar gal's goal. And then for maybe my thought leadership gal, it'll be how did you produce 10 pieces of content and how did they perform? What was the outcome of it? And so each person on the team has different goals, but for audience growth specifically, we keep a number, we stick to it for content impressions, follower growth, and we follow it through.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you're looking at which of the metrics, because there's different metrics you can look at. Is like impressions versus followers versus engagements, versus DM conversations, like all sorts of different things you could track there.
Yeah, so for me, it's followers, impressions, and engagement rate. And then the other thing that's not talked about actually enough is share of voice and benchmarked against our competitors.
Mm.
So how much do specific words that we're using are in line with our other competitors and stuff. So, hey, do we have 80% share of voice against our competitors or 60%? And so, honestly, LinkedIn can do all of this now. We have our competitors loaded in, and I love seeing them get like 2% growth over quarter, and we're like at 20%. And so sometimes it's nice to just see how we're performing.
Explain that a little more. So I'm not familiar with that actually. That sounds really interesting. So what's the share of voice part that you're comparing against competitors?
So you can share, like you can check basically on LinkedIn anything. You can see how many impressions your competitors are getting over 90 days or over a month. And then it'll show you how it was compared to their quarter before. And so on LinkedIn, you can input all your competitors and then it shows you directly. So like I'll see a competitor with so many more impressions or so many more followers, but they're growing at a 2 to 3% over quarter. So you know that they're growing at a slower rate. And while we might have less followers, I see us growing at 22%, 23% quarter over quarter. It's just like a boost to show our company that we're going the right direction and we'll catch up to them eventually because they're not, maybe they've slowed down a little bit or not investing overly in their social strategy because they're already up there. So I'm like, hey, we can catch up if we need to.
Super smart. I really like that. What are some ways that you take followers and subscribers and impressions and turn them into customers, like through the content, whatever mechanisms? I'm sure there's a variety depending on the campaign and what you're doing, but what are some things you see be really effective with that? You can turn attention. So attention on social does not necessarily always mean those people are going to eventually become customers. And so depending on what type of content you're creating, if you're creating pure top of funnel, like it may not necessarily be driving intent to the product. And so do you have, okay, we want to do 50, 60% top of funnel type posts that are meant like
Mhm.
very applicable and relevant for everybody. But now we want to have 10 to 20% bottom of funnel posts so that like the people who have hit follow, you know, 5 times a month, they're seeing a product related post. And those are the ones that are driving people to, inbound and stuff like that. Or maybe it's a newsletter flow that you all have or something like that to actually get people to come and book a demo.
The way that we split kind of our content in general is we do 3 posts a day. Usually we try to do 3 to 4 posts a day, and all of them have different buckets. So one is going to be a downloadable piece or attend a webinar or a content offer, I like to call it. There's an offer. Every day there's an offer that goes out. The second bucket that we have is what is a product led motion that we're doing. So that's like introducing a product feature, or that's like, talking about how somebody is using Clari in a day to day. Then we have another bucket called the voice of customer. So we're either doing a shout out to one of our customers, or we're doing a customer case study or something related to the customer. And so that's more middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. And so I don't really know the percentages by heart, but we try to make sure that there's a healthy mix of all of this stuff that shows each place in the funnel.
I think we'll probably see this more and more with B2B companies over the next 5 years. Like, it's going to be interesting, honestly, is like really leaning into entertainment heavy, pure top of funnel. And I think some companies will be really successful getting massive amounts of attention with that, like funny skits and things
Yeah.
like that. But the question will be, how do you turn that into, inbound? And I think there's definitely ways to do it. So yeah, I'm kind of curious at like how those different buckets, will happen and get the actual conversion. Like, because the whole point of this is not attention, it's revenue. So
Yeah, I think that, yeah, my mentor, his name's Devin Reed, and he always used to say there is a healthy balance between edutainment, he calls it. And I was like, you're right. It's like you don't want to be purely entertainment, because that's not gonna eventually, yes, it humanizes your brand, but it needs to be educational at the end of the day. Everything that we do provides value to our followers and for our audience every day, so that they walk away, if something posts up, I don't want them to like scroll past. I want them to be like, oh, I learned something, but this was cool. I understand.
totally. One other thing, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on like the content marketer role in general, is TikTok. So you personally have built like a really large following on TikTok. I think you're like 70,000 followers or something like that on TikTok. So what's your opinion, like not necessarily on the personal side, but like what you've learned or your opinions on it for B2B companies like TikTok, the platform in general?
So I think the most underrated thing that TikTok, or not, I guess it's underrated because I do it. I don't think a lot of people do it, but it's an actual educational platform. Like when I don't know how to do something, I go to TikTok. I'm like, how do I literally don't use Google anymore. I go to use and be like, how do I create this on Excel, or how do I use this thing? And so a lot of companies should honestly be using it for their implementation and educating and onboarding process, because it's an easy way to understand something in less than a minute. And so, or less than, usually that's what I see, less than a minute. And so I feel like a lot of companies need to, like, even Clari, we haven't broken into the TikTok space yet, which I would love to, but it's like, how are companies using our co-pilot to coach their reps, or, to use smart battle cards to help them out every day? It's like, that user-based video doesn't exist. When you watch a very like pristine video that's polished and everything, it's more so feature dumping. You're like, oh, cool. Okay. Copilot does X, Y, and Z. Cool. What did you learn from that though? You just know what Copilot does. I want to see how real people are using it every day in a non-polished way. Like, hey, my name is Nehal. I'm a content marketer, and this is me using Sprout Social. This is my one hack I would use for Sprout Social. That's how I see TikTok being used.
Why don't you think more companies are doing that? They don't know that that's the use case. They don't know that their customers are there. Like,
Yeah, I think that TikTok has this notion that it's only for millennials, Gen Z, etc. And a lot of people have more senior buyers and stuff. But I think what's missing is millennials and Gen Z, people who are working at these companies, are influencing the buyer decision at the end of the day. They're the ones that are going to be using, like, reps are using Clari Copilot. So like reps are on TikTok. And I know everyone thinks this, like, we don't want to go bottoms up, we want to go top down and stuff. But I personally disagree.
interesting. Yeah. I mean, like influencing the users of the product, like, is something that shouldn't be disregarded, even if you're
Yeah.
going like top, like the priority is top down. And I would argue like C-suite execs, like there's a healthy number of them that are probably on TikTok.
Mhm. Yeah, probably.
So that's really interesting. How would you recommend a company get started with it if they wanted to start experimenting with TikTok? Like what's the approach for that?
I think that I would tell companies to like map out what their end goal is. Like, is it just, I don't think TikTok is the place to like make buying decisions. They're not gonna like capture leads and capture demand there. It's more so just to show that human side
Mhm.
and that entertainment, educational side. And so I would map out, hey, like maybe these are some cool features that we want to like showcase and have organically show up. Or maybe it's more thought leadership. So, if you are like, if I'm a content marketer at a company like Clari, I could talk about how I'm doing content marketing at Clari. But the one thing you're going to walk away is like, damn, Clari does good marketing. And you now know Clari as a brand, which you might not know before. So it's just how you do it is very important.
Totally. Cool. I mean, honestly, I think it's like massive first mover advantage for those that might want to do it. I feel the same way about YouTube, honestly, too.
I
Like
know. Yeah, I want to be on YouTube
for
more.
B2B, because like YouTube Shorts operate very like they're basically, like TikTok, but YouTube Short. It's pretty much the same thing. But with YouTube, you've also got like the long form YouTube and different series you can do on there and stuff like that. And they've got the search just like TikTok. So
Yeah.
but it's not something you can just like dip your toe in, like basically just putting like repurposed webinar or like podcasts episodes on YouTube, like that's fine. They'll get views. But if there's no intentionality of the strategy there, like it's not actually going to be using like the YouTube strategy to its fullest effect.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I've always been nervous about YouTube in general because it is a different ball game. Like whenever you think of a new distribution channel, it's always like, okay, we need it. Like you can't just I would love to do that, like just post to post and see what takes off. But then once you run out of content, it's like really anxiety driven. Like, oh, what do I do? I don't know what to do.
How do you look at when you're going to or if you're going to add a new channel like that? Like, so you mentioned you'd love to do TikTok or you'd love to experiment with YouTube. Are there things that you want to have in place before you do that, or you like still there's more work to be done on top of what you're currently doing for like LinkedIn and stuff like that? Or yeah, how do you look at it?
I think it's just bandwidth.
Hmm.
And so even when I look at Clary and stuff, we've thought about expanding to other channels like X to YouTube or Instagram, but it's just there's not enough bandwidth to, even recycle our content into other this format because we'd rather recycle it into webinars, blogs, gated assets. So managing social is just a whole full-time job. And a lot of the people on our team, there's nobody that's dedicated to just social. We're content as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm a big believer, honestly, too, in just like dominating fewer platforms, doing the full execution on them instead of trying to do all the platforms in a very like mediocre way.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. What is your thoughts on the content marketer role in general right now? Like, it's an interesting time to be in content. I think on one hand, it's the best time ever to be in content because
Yeah.
there's more platforms, there's more tools. The consumption from buyers is also matching to what those platforms are. So buyers are on LinkedIn, they're on YouTube, they're listening to podcasts, they're on newsletters. Like there's more ways to reach them. But at the same time, like with AI and different things happening like that, like there's also, a very quickly changing landscape of like how the content marketer role has operated before and to like what it's operating at and with now. So what's your just take on, the content marketer role right now?
I honestly think in the next year, being a content marketer is going to be part of everybody's day to day, whether they ask for it or not. I see a huge rise in creators happening and authenticity, and people buy from people they trust. That's how we started this podcast episode. And the more people are their most authentic selves on social via content as a seller, that's the only way you're going to see an actual change in revenue, a change in just people wanting to buy from you. And so, with that being said, I think that's the main thing. I think that the content marketing landscape is changing. More people are going to become content marketers. And people are going to try to take AI as a shortcut only to realize that AI is an assistant and it's going to help you assist. I recently signed with this agency that I'm not going to out right now, but we signed with this agency and it was a really tough couple months to work with them because it felt like everything that they were giving to us in terms of content as freelancers was written by AI. And I'm like, that's not how AI works or ChatGPT. So I'm like trying to tell them like, hey, this is our tone, this is our voice. I think the role of the content marketer would be like really identify like the company or themselves, their tone, the voice, the brand, the messaging, the POV, and then using AI to help create content around that.
What would you say to any content marketers who are scared about the state of their profession or like the longevity of a content marketer role? So to your point, if everybody's now 20% content marketer across the company, is there a dedicated content marketer role, or like does that evolve to something different, or like what do you think about that?
You know, my advice would be, and I tell this to all my friends, I'm like, get more comfortable in front of the camera. Because if AI can do your job of writing, they still need somebody to actually produce the content. And I feel like that's where I have a leg up in a lot of these companies that I've worked at, where I'm like, okay, I created this script for a video. I'm gonna create a TikTok about it and let's post this TikTok or let's post this video that I'll just get in front of the camera and talk. And the fact that I'm able to be so comfortable in doing it, they need somebody more active, ready to produce content because you can't have well, you could, but like AI and working with an AI person to do, or like, to be that fake person is a lot more harder and a lot more investment versus me being able to do it. So what I tell a lot of my team and people that I've worked with is, and even my mentor that I keep mentioning, Devin, he was like, I looked for people who also had like a side hustle or invested in the content creation world aside from their day to day. Because it's like, if you know how to do it with your day to day, then it's very much easier of how much you're going to give to the company and the skill set that you have.
Yeah, like being being able to be a personality on behalf of the company. Like whether that's the term creator, personality, face of the brand, whatever term we want to use, like that's going to be a major differentiator for companies in the future. Like the value of that is increasing, where potentially the value of like V1 written content is
Yeah.
decreasing, and that's historically been what content marketing has meant in the past. Of like, well, we create written articles, and now it's so much more. So, do you think companies should hire dedicated creators? Like their job is to create in-house, to create you, like they don't work on anything else other than we create YouTube video, like they create YouTube videos, they create LinkedIn videos, they create TikToks, all that kind of stuff. Or do you think it's better to have a domain expert? Because if you bring in a creator, it's unlikely that that person is going to be a domain expert, like equivalent to a CRO who you might be selling to, and having to, they were one themselves in the past or something like that. So do you think it's better for companies to have the domain expert try to do content and get better at content, or have a creator who's really good at content and can start learning the audience and creating stuff for them?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Honestly, I could see both ways. The one thing I do always say is don't get a content creator twisted for content marketing because there are more skills
Yes.
that go towards content marketing. At the end of the day, creators are not always trying to sell you something or, they're not trying to influence pipeline. Their job doesn't depend on,
Yep.
revenue growth of a larger company. And so I would actually say, get a domain expert or somebody who knows marketing and turn them into a creator and get them more comfortable with it because a lot of the times they do want to be a creator.
I agree. I think that's probably the right place to at least start, especially in B2B. And then like we just talked about, get that down. And then if you want to expand from there, like let's take a bigger swing. Maybe go find somebody who's on the come up on TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and maybe bring them in as a full-time creator, even though they don't know like the ICP as well. And then you can take some bigger, like it's more of a moonshot, but you've at least got the the process for creating demand and building trust with buyers already from the SME's internal.
Yeah, also, like, No, you can always invest in influencer marketing, and use these creators for one-off videos or series. I think the people working at the company needs to have a background of the company, the industry, the space, everything. I know at a company or my friend's company that they use Corporate Bro for a series of like a series of videos. And so I was like, okay, see, like you're using this external person as a creator to represent your brand, but then eventually the people at the company got comfortable enough to kind of do similar styles. You can have one-off videos.
It's such a good point. You don't have to, you should take advantage of this strategy, but you don't
Yeah.
have to do it all internal. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, this has been great. Any other thing like you've been thinking about for like what you're excited about with the future of just content, or like things you're working on, or opportunities you see that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I just think it's really interesting when I work with companies, not only at Clary, I do a lot of like side consulting with clients as well too, to see like what package they end up choosing, dependent on their organization. Like there's always like a do it yourself. So, I give you the tools to, like a ebook, or I give you like a training session and then you do it yourself. And then doing it like with you is a lot like workshops and like mapping it out with them. And then a lot of clients just end up like do it for me. And so I'm like, okay, there's like 3 buckets that I've seen people do, and a lot of people have been mixed between what they wanna do. My advice would be to do it with me always, because I think that's such a valuable skill to have, to know content marketing and content strategy as a whole.
I agree. I don't think you can outsource the entire thing like I think it's really important to have some of the competency in-house, but you don't have to do the full execution in-house. You can bring in experts to like help get you up to speed on something, or outsource a particular like process. But I think owning the strategy and like understanding the strategy behind it, it's like tough to outsource the entire thing.
I agree,
So
and so my one takeaway is get on that content marketing train. Time.
awesome. Well, obviously, I think everybody should go follow you on LinkedIn, and follow Clara on LinkedIn to see all this execution in real time. Anywhere else you want to point people to if they like want to reach out and, hey, like I'd love to work with you, or like anything else. Obviously, I think you should go check out your TikTok to.
Yeah, check out my TikTok if you ever want movie or TV show recommendations, because I give fire recs. But no, I feel like just connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to work with people, and yeah, always here.
Awesome. Thanks, Nehal. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Eric.